I'm hanging with NadjNJea, and I'm Margaret Winslow, Curator of Contemporary Art at the Delaware Art Museum.
Hey everybody, it's NadjNJea.
Hey everybody, it's NadjNJea.
And we are here with the incredible Margaret Winslow.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So we're going to dig right in with the first question, and we're just going to ask the big one. And that is, how did this whole exhibition come to fruition?
That is such a great question, and one I admittedly love answering. And in part because it has, I think, a wonderfully interesting history that looks back at the museum and looks at Wilmington and its community. So back before 2015, I was researching the contemporary art community in Wilmington in the 1970s and 80s, preparing for a show that we presented at the museum in 2015 called Dream Streets. And it looked at those 2 decades very specifically. It was an incredibly vibrant time, as you probably both know, in Wilmington's history. And a lot of fabulous organizations were founded during those 2 decades, like Aesthetic Dynamics Incorporated. And here at the Delaware Art Museum in our archives, we have incredibly rich holdings on the histories and careers of artists who made Wilmington either their long-term home or were here during an important moment in their artistic careers. And in looking at those artist vertical files, I came across the checklist for Afro-American Images 1971. And anyone who's familiar with art history of the second half of the 20th century, as soon as they opened up that pamphlet, they would have seen and recognized immediately just how incredibly important this exhibition was. So their artists included like Norman Lewis, Faith Ringgold, Hale Woodruff, Sam Gilliam, Edward Loper Jr., Edward Loper Sr. And you flip back to the front and I look, and it's like, this was held at the Wilmington Armory. And I've never heard about this exhibition. So that started the journey, a look at this incredibly important exhibition and realizing through additional research, it wasn't adequately documented in art history.
Wow. So forgive me. As me and Jay are literally, we're learning so much as we're going on this journey. Your title, can you repeat your title and tell everyone what exactly you do?
Of course. So I am the Curator of Contemporary Art here at the Delaware Art Museum, and I oversee the Contemporary Art program. And that includes both the museum's collections from around 1950 through work made today, as well as temporary exhibitions that put those collections in context with what's happening on a national and international scale. I also oversee our Copeland Sculpture Garden, which is the museum's outdoor gallery, I like to think of it, with works of art that are outside on view in a natural setting for enjoyment by the community.
So, sorry, Jay, I'm jumping in here. So in my head, I'm listening to you. So you basically get to play in art all day and research what you find interesting. And I'm assuming you would pitch it to a board or someone, like a group of people, and say, okay, I really think this matches our current times. I'd like to put a show together. Is that how it goes in a sense?
Definitely. I think that's a really good, concise description for the process. A lot of the work that I do is that deep dive and deep research. I also try to continuously monitor what's happening locally, nationally, internationally. Where are those interests? What are the key concerns? The whole genesis for the 2015 exhibition, Dream Streets, really came about because, you know, you probably both know, in 2008, before the financial crisis, Wilmington's downtown was shifting drastically. There was a lot of renovation, and the Queen, specifically our fabulous theater, was undergoing renovation. And I had the opportunity to enter that space before they started construction, and found on the second floor there was a contemporary art gallery there. And other artist collectives like Michael Kalmbach and New Wilmington Art Association, I was part of that. We were presenting exhibitions in downtown Wilmington and feeling very much like, I don't know, maybe renegades, for lack of a better word. Were really pushing the envelope. And we didn't know about that incredible history that was happening in the city before. So it was about putting all of the important work that was happening in 2009 to 2015 in context with what was happening in the city in the 1970s, and making those connections between then and now. So I monitor all of that. I try to, really keep an eye on what's happening. And then you're exactly right. I share that information, that research with my colleagues, both in curatorial and in learning and engagement. And we see how it aligns with what the museum's mission is, which is always dedicated to serving the communities where the Delaware Art Museum lives.
Okay. Jay?
So when we go back to, I guess, what did you say, like, maybe around 2015, as you uncover, the 1971, when did you immediately start the ball rolling to making this happen again, as soon as possible? Did you kind of have a specific time frame, like when is the proper time to do it? What was the process of getting it from that point to now?
That's a great question. And it's one that I've thought about a lot in retrospect, because it wasn't maybe as somewhat conscious, but not as conscious as I realized at the time. I knew in presenting that 2015 exhibition, it's a big survey show, 2 decades. And I was looking at the visual arts, at dance, at theater, and everything that was happening within those realms. And I thought, wow, well, there'll be a lot of additional work to do, a lot of additional stories to explore in that project. And one that just I kept coming back to, because we did highlight it, and I worked very closely with Dr. James E. Newton for the Dream Streets to start looking at Percy Ricks and the importance of the works that he did. And Dr. Newton wrote an essay for the Dream Streets catalog. And he and I just kept talking. We kept talking about the importance of Aesthetic Dynamics Incorporated, the initiatives that they were pushing forward in the city, what they were responding to in Wilmington's history. And we kept talking about what the possibility of a 50th anniversary exhibition would look like.
Gotcha.
And so that's how that came together. An important part of that was the close collaboration with Dr. Newton. And then, realizing quite early that this project could not happen without the close collaboration, co-presenting of the project with Aesthetic Dynamics Incorporated.
Wow. Jay?
So thus far, what has been your feedback from the artists who are still with us, who have seen, this take place kind of in the way that it probably should have 50 years ago? Like, what has been the general response from the artists? I'm sure it's positive, but I'm interested in really hearing some specifics if possible.
Yeah.
It has been positive. And it's been I'll admittedly, at times, there's some bittersweet stories, quite honestly, that come out of it. One artist, I was so grateful to connect with him, William Travis. He was primarily working out of New Jersey, but went to graduate school in Philadelphia. And I was able to connect with him. And he recalled the exhibition. He remembered driving his sculpture down here to the museum. One of the Aesthetic Dynamics members, Carol Schreier-Reed, remembered the moment that he brought the sculpture into the armory. He set it down, it held the space.
Wow.
And I was so grateful to have the opportunity to spend time with him and to share that, he remembered being one of the youngest artists in the group. And there were so many artists included in the exhibition that he was looking up to, and he was so grateful. And then I received the very sad news from his brother that he passed away before the exhibition went on view. And I can't help but think about the incredible response that artists who were still living during the development of the exhibition, the incredible response that they had, the generosity with which they shared their recollections, their memories, and the excitement of the project. I think about them so much, and I try to hold their memories close to my heart when I talk about the exhibition. And there are others who so openly shared that they had no idea how important the project was. Like it's like, oh, Percy Ricks was amazing and he was a visionary. They're like, and I'm just so grateful that they were there. That's what they say. Grateful that they were there and part of it.
Yeah.
So I've been mulling over in my head how to ask you this. So the only way is to just ask it. So what have you learned about the African-American community based on their response to this exhibition? Because one of the recurring things, I guess, would be that they were turned away initially, and then this is, their moment to shine where they should have been in the first place. And I'm sure you've read a lot of stories, you've heard a lot of stories, and like you said, you had a lot of bittersweet emotions. So I guess for the African-American artists, what do you feel you've learned most during this time?
Oh gosh, that is such a fabulous and incredibly deep and reflective question. And something that I've been thinking a lot about, certainly. It's been interesting to talk to folks who participated in the original exhibition and to hear them talk about the Delaware Art Museum, and rightfully so, to call out its support of institutional racism, its racist approach when it came to exhibitions, the museum's collection, to hear stories of Edward Loper Sr. being turned away at the door and how Edward Loper Jr. continued to feel that legacy. And it's been really interesting to see those, not shifts, but an open and forgiving embrace of the Delaware Art Museum. And, I've thought, and I don't know, I think this maybe goes off your question, and I'm probably getting too philosophical or personal, what have you, but, I think really about the place of privilege and not having a place of, not being in a place of forgiveness, or ever having been put in a place of having to offer forgiveness to someone else. So that's a theme that I keep. I don't know. I don't think I've answered your question directly.
No, that is a beautiful answer.
But it's, and I will say that so many of my own thoughts about this particular history and Wilmington, all of this, have really been guided by all of the thoughtful conversations that took place during our advisory committee meetings, and incredible thinkers like Marilyn Whittington, Director Emerita at Delaware Humanities. Oh goodness, I mean, the list goes on. Jean Nutter, Colette Gator, who've really pushed these conversations and supported the museum in thinking deeply, and the staff in thinking deeply about its history.
Yeah. So I guess in my head, from where do you go from here? So this was a reintroduction and almost like a hug. We hugged it out. We're doing the exhibition. We're working on it. We understand, where things were back then, and this is how we're going to move forward. Do you have a plan for not just African-American artists or urban artists in general, but more specifically artists in our current climate, like our local artists that have made names for themselves? Will there be something for them? Are there plans for that?
That's a great question. And it's one I admittedly have an interesting kind of dual vision of the work of a contemporary art curator, or maybe the work that I've carved out for myself, is because there is, I think, this constant need to look back and to look at this moment. And so as a kind of thinking of paths forward in this particular exhibition, I think the museum really needed to start with acknowledgement. And it was so tempting to, it was tempting to try to think up programs or initiatives or what have you, and kind of run ahead before the museum had actually taken a moment to stop and say, this is what we did. And we acknowledge that moment.
God, I love that. Wow, that's beautiful.
And really, and again, it's Marilyn Whittington specifically, Arnold Hurt, with whom I've worked so closely.
We love him.
On this exhibition. I mean, Arnold and I speak multiple times a week, and his guidance, connection to Percy Ricks's vision. I mean, that's the other thing, is I've been so grateful to hear just these wonderful memories and recollections and quotes from Percy Ricks that have continued to guide this. But, hearing that from really amazing elders in our community, to kind of to make haste slowly, to allow for that time, to keep the long horizon in mind. But it also means, doing that work historically, remembering that there are so many gaps in history because of institutional racism across the board. We know that these white supremacist structures lead to major gaps in what is recorded. So to look at that deeply, and at the same time be creating and supporting structures that support artistic creativity in our city today. So it means thinking about, working with artists on specific initiatives. It means thinking about workshopping, training opportunities, platforms and places that the Delaware Art Museum can create to support artists in the city.
Yeah. And to your point, Naj, this is more of a comment than a question, but like one of the things that has been really great for me in terms of, having any involvement with this exhibition is it has given me a very clear picture of my sort of responsibility and kind of where I stand in the community. Because if I was my dad's age, that very well could have, I'm basically standing on the shoulders of Arnold Hurt. You know what I'm saying? He's a musician. Thank God I've been able to come to the art museum and do songs that are, very politically charged, and, do that in comfort and in freedom. So I recognize that. And I feel like, it's awesome that you guys were able to make that amend. And I guess the only thing kind of left, not that you're doing anything wrong by no means, is, at a certain, you can't repeat the mistake. And as someone who understands that, I'm not going to name specific visual artists' names, but we all have connections to them. So, it'll be super cool to see, the generation that's closer to my age range, get the opportunity that previous generations didn't get, because that's how you really fix, the institutional racism that you described.
I have two questions. I don't know if they're the same, but so the first one is when the exhibition was completed, when all the artwork was up, were you a process of picking, were you a part of the process for picking each piece, or was someone else a part of it? That's the first question. And if you were a part of it, what was your
how do you go about picking the pieces?
Yes, but more so, what did you feel? What did you feel when you were picking them? If you were picking them, and if not, then we obviously know.
So this current project is a restaging. So that checklist was set by Percy Ricks. And I'll say it was also set by the artists, because as Dr. Newton described it, and as current members, or I should say previous members of Aesthetic Dynamics, but folks who are still with us today who can talk about that process, Percy Ricks utilized this great network that he had. He was born in DC, educated at Howard University, and then graduate work in Philadelphia, in New York. He's here in Wilmington. He had an incredible network. So he utilized those networks. He reached out to artists. And in some cases, he was asking for specific works of art. In other cases, he allowed the artists to show what they were most excited to show at that moment. And then he invited artists to invite their artist friends. So it's this, and that's why it kind of grew in this wonderfully diverse way. That's one of the great parts about the exhibition, I think, is there's a great range in styles, subject matter, media included. So in that pamphlet that I found, it's a price list. So it lists every work of art, the associated media, I don't have dimensions, and then what the price was at the time. And a catalog was published to accompany the exhibition. It did not reproduce every object. There were over 130 works of art in the original show. It was a massive project, but it reproduced nearly every artist with one work of art. So then I got to go on that wonderful treasure hunt of trying to locate as many of those original works of art as possible. One of the a kind of indication that it might be possible is that in 2009, we had already acquired a painting by the Philadelphia painter Humbert Howard. It's titled Black Orpheus. And it was in the 1971 show. Wow. So when I saw that pamphlet, I thought, oh my gosh, this painting's in our collection. That's amazing. So when I couldn't find a work of art, I attempted to find a work that was representative in style, subject matter, date by that same artist, because the goal was then to represent as many of the original artists as possible.
Okay.
Cool. Can I ask, I'd like to ask you a couple of more personal questions about your, about your experience and background as an artist. So how did you, come into becoming into your role that you have now? I'm sure that you have a creative side to you, and I'd love to hear more about that.
So, and that's a great question. And I get that question often. I don't have a background in visual arts, though I was raised by two parents who are artists. My father was a broom maker. Broom maker.
What?
Like sweeping, yeah. So he was a member of the Pennsylvania Guild of Craftsmen. And my mother, now retired, they're both retired, but she was a high school art and art history teacher. Wow. So many trips to Washington, D.C., and I found every couch in every gallery. I thought it was incredibly boring. So I went to undergrad thinking I would focus on biology, and I failed chemistry. That was pretty obvious, like that wasn't going to go anywhere, but I was wide awake at 8 a.m. in my art history survey courses. And I fell in love with art history, and I fell in love with objects too, and what they communicated, the connections. I mean, there being those connections between the artist and the viewer. And so that was my introduction into art history, and then subsequently into museum work.
So it's kind of safe to say that you're just a giant fan of visual arts.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I was a dancer until graduate school.
There we go.
And my daughter. So I danced first ballet and then modern, and then was in a professional modern dance company for many years. So that creativity is in there. I take 11:30 ballet classes with Ashley S.K. Davis at Pieces of a Dream. Big shout out. She's amazing.
I didn't know that you took classes there, though.
Yeah, I totally do.
That's hilarious.
That's fantastic.
She literally lives around the corner from me.
she's just so wonderful.
Yes. Wow. I I have to say, hearing you discuss your process for the exhibition and how everything came together, it sounds like it was an emotional time for you. Like you speak very I just feel it. Like you seem very proud and thankful and appreciative of the time, you know, you get to spend with the artists and looking at the work. Do you hope that people get the same experience as you going through the gallery?
I certainly hope so. And I think we try to nurture those engagements. So we have community labels, for example, throughout the museums galleries, but certainly in this exhibition. And we've invited various folks, whether they be members of the advisory committee, for example, or performing artists, to write on works of art and to respond personally to a work of art as a way to create and nurture those connections. And I also write about the works of art, and I write about the exhibition. And my hope is always that I am weaving that enthusiasm that I have for the stories into my words. That's the hope.
I love that.
I'm going to ask a dopey question because, you know, I have to always explain that I'm a musician, and I've been able to slowly but surely develop a better understanding and appreciation for all the visual arts for a lot of different reasons. But I want to ask you, and I know this is a hard question, but like if you could give us the top 2 or 3 paintings that just really instantly kind of grabbed you and just made you think, wow.
Oh gosh, I know that's so difficult, but you know, I have to admit, I love touring the exhibition. It's really difficult to do virtual tours of the show online. Certainly make it work. And I love the Alma Thomas painting that we have on view in the gallery. I am so incredibly grateful that the National Museum of African American History and Culture was willing to lend this fabulous canvas to the museum. Alma Thomas is, oh my goodness, just brilliant at capturing the beauty of nature around us. Her colors are vibrant. Her marks are beautifully put down. It's just this, it just sings with energy. And that work of art was on view in 1971 in the Wilmington Armory. And not much longer before that, in May of 1970, it was on the cover of Crisis. And the thought of this fabulous image circulating around the nation and then having that specific painting on view here in Wilmington and having it back 50 years later, it comes together beautifully. The story, the image, her history. So full admission, the Alma Thomas is definitely one of my favorites. And oh gosh, it's hard. The Norman Lewis is just incredibly powerful as well. The title is Bonfire, and the image radiates. I think that's like I don't know. I feel like that's one of the best words. It radiates with energy and power. And again, I'm incredibly grateful to the lender, the Studio Museum in Harlem, who was able to lend this painting that was from the original exhibition. And then I would list like every other painting, because we have fabulous Edward Loper Juniors, fabulous Edward Loper Seniors. And I'll just give a shout out to Louise Clement Hoff. Her Blue Nude is just a stunning figurative and still life study. An artist who taught for more than 50 years at Fleischer Art Memorial in Philadelphia, and who influenced generations of artists. And you can see why when you look at her painting.
Wow.
Margaret, I don't want to make you blush, but you just lit up. You completely, you talk about radiating. You woke up and you became absolutely free and passionate about the works you were speaking about. And that was cool to see, because that lets me know how connected you are to the art that you're putting up there. And it makes me want to go back, because every time, like, and I also sense from you, and I don't want to speak for you, but like, when we first started talking about all of the, you know, the whole exhibition, you spoke with a certain, I think, kind of a reverence, and Nadj touched upon it. And I think both of us, when we walked in there, it was, I've said it before, it was very similar to when you walk into any kind of a sacred space. There's a whole thing there. And, you know, it was really cool to just see you light up with passion about those works. That was cool.
Yeah.
You can tell I love my job. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's beautiful that the theme, the recurring theme is just this emotional, just loving, happy feeling towards the exhibition, you know, looking at each piece and really feeling something. And Jay said it earlier about, you know, we're musicians. We've never really dabbled in visual arts, but this opportunity has really, really taught us, you know, how to appreciate this type of artwork. And I think this was the perfect time for us to learn about visual arts and the museum's processes with this specific exhibition, because it's so diverse, you know, in styles, between the sculptures and I don't even know what to call the one thing that looks like an ice thing with a light. I don't even, it's like, there's so many different pieces and so many different stories within each piece. So it kind of gave us a moment to really dive in, like, wow, it's not.
As you make a really good point too, that I'm just thinking about as we're talking. Like, you said the word diversity, and as soon as you, like, it might be really easy to be like, oh, well, this is Black art, and Black art is this, but it's a huge, diverse, you know, spread of all kinds of art that I can't even speak on technically. And you're so right. It's Black art, but it's extremely diverse within that Blackness. So it gives us
an opportunity to not only connect with where they were mentally, but, you know, open our minds to what art can be. Because for a long time, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, the only Black art I knew was what you could get during Odunde down South Street with the brown skinned woman in the head wrap. Like, that was the Black art I knew, you know, or the strong Black man wrapping his arms around the woman and her holding her baby. Like, that was Black art to me. So this was like, that's Black art. This is Black art. You know, it just really, I don't feel dumb.
Well, I think, like, you know, you're hitting on such an important point that was part of the conversation in 1971 about what is Black art, what are the expectations for Black artists at that time, and in some cases there were really strong expectations. You should be making imagery that is communicating or aligning directly with the work of civil rights and social justice, for example. And so an artist who was working abstractly saying, well, you know, those are my concerns, definitely. And I'm going to show them in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I think Percy Ricks, I mean, he must have been, so many folks have talked about it who studied with him, an incredible educator, because not only was he providing a space for African-American artists to show their work, an open space, but he created an incredibly inspirational moment for hundreds of young people. Yeah. That was one of his main goals, was to get in as many young people, whether they, and I say young, I mean, this is from elementary school all the way through college. You know, there were folks coming through. Those exhibition catalogs that he printed, they were printed and distributed to teachers. Those were his audiences. And he was showing the diversity, and I think hoping, and certainly did, inspire generations of artists who saw that exhibition.
I mean, he literally has been inspiring me. So, you know.
Wow. The questions you would have had for him, Jay, my God, you'd have talked that man's ear off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and me both. That is, it's hard when one delves deeply into histories that are, in some cases, right around 50 years old. And sometimes, you know, you gratefully rely on the memories of their friends and their families. Mm-hmm. But it's hard if you've never had the opportunity to meet them. And that was the case with me. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Percy Ricks before he passed. And certainly one of my biggest desires.
Yeah. I'm excited about the future of all of the artwork. I'm excited about the artists and their names and what this has now started. And I'm excited about our community, because this is giving the artists of now that are coming up, you know, something to work with for the future. Like, they're like, okay, I see a future there for us, you know? So I appreciate the work that you've done and the work that the Art Museum has done. And we thank you for this interview.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you both about the project. And I'm so grateful for the platform that you both provide. I mean, the work that you all are doing is incredibly inspirational as well. So thank you both. I'm pleased to be a guest.
Yay. Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. We love you. Bye.